So when I read I think it was the Atlantic article about dude getting invited to which should have been a highest security level dialogue. Ironically, on Signal though, of all platforms, like, and he thought it was like, oh, surely this is a hoax. This is like some disinformation. I'm not sure if I believe that part of it. I'm pretty sure that if somebody gets invited to something and they see a list of names like that and they start saying things that even remotely resemble, I don't want to call it reality, but it really is reality. It's bizarre world reality. Like when that stuff starts like being talked about, discussed, and it's like, wait a second, this shit's actually real. Like that's one of those like, thank goodness for the mute button. Like,
You know, the more you describe it, I mean, I read the story, but when you're saying it back, I feel like someone blew the whistle on them by adding that journalist to the chat.
oh yeah, oh yeah,
And so I feel like this, because the whole issue is like they're not supposed to be using private communication channels for government, for official government business. And so they're breaking all kinds of regulations doing that. The information is almost irrelevant in that it could have been plans for Social Security. It could have been information that they were talking about in emails previously. But the fact that it's government business and they're using it, um, private channels to communicate about it, they already fucked up there. But then the journalist, the way that the journalist got added and then ran the story, and then the parties involved tried to lie, and then um, Tulsi Gabbard might have committed perjury in the
ooh.
process
A bunch of people
because
might have committed perjury.
no, she explicitly was called before Congress and
Oh,
asked about it, and so yeah, and that I know I'm this is like li- explicitly perjury in that um she was sworn to the truth in her testimony, and she said that no, she couldn't remember if any names or locations were used, and they were. Um, so for something to have happened that recently, and for her to have said that, she basically lied about it. Um, because there's no way she would have forgotten that quickly, and so it's you know depending on how it's very possible that some people are going to lose their positions over what's happening, depending on how far they want to take responsibility for what happened versus if they if somebody wants to protect any of the people involved, it's going to become a huge fight, which is why they may not want to expend all the political energy on protecting these people. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the parties involved because they basically fired a competent person for Hegseth to come in and you know fuck up within a month. This is such a major fuck up, and I've seen people call it whiskey leaks. That was one of the best ones.
that's great.
But they're like trying to say it wasn't that big of a deal. So then the reporter released the text messages. That's the whole reason the text messages got released is
Yeah.
because the reporter or there's okay. it's dubious in that the reporter should have just came out with the text messages in the first place. By not coming out with the text messages and by coming out with the story, they gave the involved parties a chance to sort of prepare. It's like it wasn't the worst case scenario for the parties involved because all of the all of the text messages got released. They got a chance to sort of shape the narrative about them before it came out, and so their um, manipulative actions make it so that their constituents were already primed not to believe the things that were in the text messages. So it's like, oh, the text messages are part of a conspiracy, but it the more they do this, the only it's only going to make their constituents more chaotic in the end. It's like the January 6th chaos that they couldn't control is eventually going to turn on them. And I think that's one of those times that they're playing with fire, and it's already started to come back in their town halls and their death threats, and the anger and the flack has already started to come facing on them. But it's like as this heats up, we're not even into spring fully, and so
Yeah,
getting
spring was
to a
like 4 days ago.
if people are already setting things on fire and the protests have already gotten to a point where it's like violence has erupted. By the time we're in the middle of the summer, it's going to be so intense and there's nowhere else for them to aim that energy. And so there's no Biden left. It's not the pro-Palestinian students that are doing it because they basically all got arrested or they're getting swept up right now. So it's not even those people. It's the right wingers that are lashing out and going to these town halls and saying tax the rich and things, down to the way that they had to turn around and make it so that attacking Teslas was domestic terrorism. They are reaching so much that by the time by the time summer rolls around, if an actual event of terrorism has happened, they won't be able to say anything using that rhetoric. Like, God forbid other types of violence happens. Like, they won't. It's America. Other violence is definitely going to happen, and it's a matter of once that starts to happen as the year just progresses. The if they're going to acknowledge the reality of America, they're going to either have to look at the rising tensions, the rising violence, or where all that's coming from. They're not going to be able to ignore it. And so it's getting to this head where all of the neoliberal and neoconservative ideas are all being challenged, and there's no scapegoats. Like, you can't blame trans people anymore. You can't blame black people. You can't blame DEI. There's nothing, you can't blame affirmative action. There's nothing left for them to blame. And going into this summer, oh my God, it's like we've already seen the natural disaster start. And so I think trying to turn attention to Yemen is like a last ditch effort to get the tension offshore, but it's not going to work.
I don't know. I don't know enough about Yemen or I don't know enough about their infrastructure or anything really, other than there's a group of people there that have plenty of drones and missiles and some boats. Though not as many as they had before they started, aiming their missiles and launching their boats at cargo ships that are kind of just doing their job.
This didn't just start. They've been
Oh, I
fighting in
know.
Yemen for years,
Oh, I
and
know.
that's
Like, but this last bit where the United States has been really active in destroying shit in Yemen, that's been that's because of the Gaza most recent Gaza conflict. The Houthis got involved, Hezbollah got involved, Syria got involved, everyone got involved.
no, no, it's not. No, 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 no. They bombed those places. They
No,
didn't get involved.
that's what I mean though.
Fucking Israel bombed those
I guess I should
places.
say like Israel involved them.
Yes, that's it's not. It wasn't that direction.
They didn't choose to get involved. Maybe they did a little at some point after shit started getting really real. But yeah, there's a lot
I
of
think.
there's a lot of things that happened.
Well, I mean, the Houthis have definitely been fucking with trade routes. So it's like it's not as if they've been um inactive concerning disruption, but they didn't start the antagonism. And that's kind of where it's like the rhetoric has all been like, Houthis just started fucking with our shipping lanes. Like, no, we've been bombing them for like almost a decade, maybe even over a decade this at this point. It started under Obama. Like all the Yemen shit, it hasn't stopped
Yeah.
since
Well,
I think it
they
was
were at war with
Obama.
what's the other country that they were at war with that we decided to give weapons to, like Saudi Arabia or something like that.
Yeah, and that's part of it is like
Yeah,
we've
and
we've been working with the Saudis bombing Yemen and like starving people in Yemen, disrupting their food lines, and that's why they started disrupting the shipping lines because people in Yemen were fucking starving because of military industrial intervention. So that's kind of where it's like, yeah, it feels like Yemen and the Houthis just kind of came out of nowhere, but it's because we've literally been fucking starving their people for like I said, it's I think it's over a decade at this point. And again, they break it up to make it seem like, oh, it happened 12 years ago or that was then. Like, no, all of these things are basically the same campaign to the Yemeni people from their perspective. It's like a nonstop barrage. Like just because we switch presidents doesn't mean they see it as if suddenly it's like a different campaign. And so I think that's where our our political appearance of change and like further the way that Democrats will act like shit is not happening under Obama or under Biden, like all as if ICE didn't exist under Biden, as if fucking
ICE existed before Obama.
right, of course, but as if like the deportation stopped under Obama and Biden, and then it's only happening under right wing presidents.
Obama deported a ton of people.
Right, but the way that the people who claim to be Democrats just don't they did not hold Obama's or Biden's feet to the fire on any of these issues. And explicitly, when there was like the DNC um
The
fucking
FEMA camps were real.
right, but when they were doing the like the DNC like getting ready for the election and people were protesting saying Palestinian people's names, and the people walking up to the Democratic convention were just plugging their ears and screaming. Like literally, there's all these pictures of Democrats going to the convention, plugging their ears and antagonizing the protesters. And then they had that moment in Michigan when Kamala was like, "Let me speak. It's my turn to speak," and shouted down one of the protesters, and then everybody got all gung ho like against the Palestinian protesters or the pro-Palestinian protesters, and that's when all of the fucking students who were protesting under Biden started getting put in prison, or they were starting to arrest them then, and they were pulling out the snipers then. But all those same fucking Democrats who are upset about what's happening now were shut the fuck up then. So I don't understand where this selective outrage comes from when Democrats know some shit's wrong because Trump's doing it, but when Biden was doing it, oh, it's just part of their plan. You need to give them time. And so that's where I'm like, this
Yeah.
this feels like, on the one hand, that's why the Democrats have all shut the fuck up because they can't really do anything because their whole strategy has been like, oh, look who's in power. They fucked up. And since no Democrats have any sort of control, they just can't even really say anything because their whole political action has been about just pointing at the other side and like how terrible the other side has been. So that's where I'm looking at what's happening now, and we just got lucky that the Republicans took over everything and that there's nothing for them to blame anymore. It's like, it's not that the Republicans are better, it's just that we had to get to a point where they couldn't blame anybody else and had to take fucking responsibility so their dumbass constituents can finally see, oh, yeah, the Republican policy fucking sucks. It sucks for poor people. It sucks for middle class people. It sucks for anybody who's not a rich white man. And they're finally seeing it and they're finally standing up. But the only reason that's happening is because Republicans have nobody else to blame. And unfortunately, we had to get to this point because Democrats, it feels like they are part of the same team in that we never should have let Ivy League elites become the leaders of what's meant to be the party of working people or party of social ethics, because even if it's not about the working class, you're not going to be able to get the best representation of understanding social ethics from Ivy League people or elites, even if they are supposedly on the left, because clearly they don't stay in touch with working class or mainstream ethical identities, which is where you get Kamala Harris campaigning with fucking Meghan McCain. What the fuck was that, man?
Yeah, I'm really starting to
What the fuck was
wonder
that, bro?
if the whole point of electing officials is really just to select the person who's going to be able to deliver the shitty message to the most people without causing a riot.
I mean, that's what it feels like, and
I'm serious. Like it,
I know, and that's why
like
I mean,
it's really fucked up.
we were on the verge of a civil war because these fucking idiots thought somehow that Joe Biden was really like a communist because they're fucking stupid and they don't know what words mean and they fucking listen to these people lie to them and lie and lie. And honestly, if Joe Biden had run again or if Kamala had won, we might have had a fucking like the start of a civil war, in that they're not coordinated enough to get it past the first day slash the first week. They would start the first day and then it would fall apart by day 3, and then you'd have all these conclaves of like people who were trying to rebel against the government, and now they started to turn on each other, and now there's infighting, and now there's hostages that they were originally part of the same, and all that shit would happen so fast because there's no actual uniting element on the right wing besides like hate for non-white male. Like if you're not a white male that's heterosexual, they're going to hate on you, and that's the only thing that's uniting them, and that's not enough to actually sustain a civil war, which is why the fucking South lost the first time. So it's like, you know, in reality, even if it like we're not making it about an actual war, and even if it came down to it, that would never turn out the way that the right wingers think that it would. But even in that, the people at the top don't care about those people, and they're finally realizing it. And I think they thought for a long time that the lies that they were being told about how they're better than black people and how they're better than Mexicans and how they're better than gay people and how they're better than all these other people, they realize that the people who've been saying that don't actually believe it, and that
We've got a Vicini situation where I don't think that word means what you what you think it means. They keep saying better, but that's not what it sounds like to me.
which is also why I think you're getting resistance against, you're going to have elections, and there's just too much information for these people to be able to go out in public when we have the specter of Luigi Mangione hanging over us at all times. For forever moving forward, that specter is always going to cast a shadow over everyone. And that's kind of where, on the one hand, I know for a fact we've hit peak capitalism, and it was like 20 years ago. And obviously, people are trying to hold on to it. But I also believe we hit peak exploitation with executives not thinking about the repercussions of their actions, in that they've already started to try to prepare themselves based on knowing that their actions are putting them in a place where people might want to retaliate. So that means they're thinking about the consequences of their actions, and the consequences of their actions are now a random hooded person might walk up to you and fucking turn the power off. And so when it was all like,
Man,
oh, I'm making billions of dollars, and that was the worst thing that could happen is I have a golden parachute and I fucking have to get bailed out. Oh, woe is me. That's no longer the worst thing that can happen, and they all know that.
you know, if we all have to give up wearing hoodies for all time to make CEOs like behave for the rest of like eternity and stuff, that's a really small price to pay. We can give up hoodies if they'll stop being sociopaths. But I don't think it'll actually happen, so I'm not going to give up my hoodies.
I mean, they tried to use Luigi as a reason to bring back the mask bans, so it's not
What are they going to do on
impossible.
Halloween when people are wearing like, you know, Luigi
Exactly. I mean,
Luigi
but
face?
these are the types of things where, yeah, it was we thought they would never be able to ban raves, but they did. They
Yeah,
didn't stop raves from happening, but they fucking banned raves.
there was a
And this is
congressional act, a
right, and
rave
this is
act. Those
but this is also why those people are never actually going to get in a place where they can control a fad or a movement or a wave or a trend in the way that they want to. They couldn't stop they couldn't stop raves. They tried to stop raves, but they fucking couldn't. There's there's been nothing that they've gone to war against that they've stopped, as far as I know. Um, maybe war against literacy.
That failed though.
That's what I mean. Like that may be the only war they've failed. that
Well,
that's what that's what
no,
I'm
well,
saying. That may be the only war that they've actually failed is the war against literacy. Like that's that's
oh man. I think that the
in that.
education system's getting pretty annihilated right now. But this might just be like the iceberg getting cracked a whole bunch, all at once, and we're losing a shelf or something off of a glacier. Either way, it's not good. I'm not trying to paint a
I
pretty
mean,
picture. This is like there's a lot of horrible shit happening, but yeah, literacy
well,
is definitely. 5 years ago, I would regularly complain about adult illiteracy, and I
mm-hmm.
think I kind of gave up on it for a while because it just seemed like it was pointless because it just sounds like harping on it after a while. But and I'm not just talking about we're never just talking about one's ability to read written words, although that's pretty fundamental, but also to understand subtext and have historical literacy and cultural literacy. Oh my goodness. There aren't enough like actual jobs in America for America to start like closing itself off and isolation policy and that kind of crap. That never ending just we're number one at being alone.
Well, and they're already talking about allowing child labor to fill the gaps that the immigrant um, crackdowns have created. And it's not, this is like, I was talking to someone about this months ago, in that it's like the way that they want to do the crackdowns, they're going to create these work gaps that they're not going to be able to fill fast enough because they won't. Not only will they not be able to train people fast enough, there's not just simply not going to be enough people to fill those jobs. And so
Yeah, there's going to
this
be a
is
bunch of people who wouldn't even think to look at that for that job. There are people
right.
that don't even know that job exists.
Well, and it's the more things fall apart, the more of those job openings are going to happen, and there's not going to be people to fill those jobs. So it's going to be a point where all of the labor that they've tried to cut out of the economy using AI is going to have to be replaced, because all of the things that are going to need physical maintenance are going to come up on those maintenance deadlines, and all of the people that they've cut out are going to have to be hired back, but they're all going to be in the international market in a way that they weren't before. And here's one of the big issues is every time one of these events happens in the American economy, it forces the people to evolve and start doing things that they weren't doing in the previous iteration. And for as an example, it's like 25 years ago, people did not generally work two jobs. That was not something that was normal. It started about 20 to 25 years ago, but it was fairly normal that if you had a job, you could get enough hours at your position so that you didn't need two jobs. What happened is they made it so that companies didn't have to legally give people 40 hours to be considered as full time, and then full time dropped to 32 hours. And I was in the workforce when this happened. And so I started seeing the people who were
I think it's
in the work
29 now.
mm, and the people who were there before me, I saw them complaining about this and like not knowing what to do, and their recourse was just to get another job instead of rioting, instead of stopping the economy like the French do and like preventing that type of loss of rights or loss of privilege. They just went with it, and they kept doing that to a point where minimum wage has not gone up. The amount of work or amount of hours that you need to qualify as full time has gone down to the point where it's in the 20s now. That's crazy. So that
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 means that you can
America,
only work 29 hours, and after that, they have to start giving you benefits.
right,
But then, if they don't schedule for you for more than 29 hours, but they expect you to, be on call.
right.
Oh,
And this is when I know we've discussed the clopening before, but that's when they'll put you in that position and then have a person expected to close or open. Sorry, hold on. Sorry about that.
and we're back. Yeah, I'm, it's crazy because anytime I look at job marketing, it's either done directly from some company or organization's HR department, or it's on LinkedIn. And I'm starting to get wary of LinkedIn because it just seems like every other giant funnel to collect people's information to sell it to some third party that's going to market stuff to me on the internet, or potentially mail crap to me that I have to recycle.
Well, it's turned into such an AI slop fest. And it's like, it started when they started doing the auto generated messages within the platform. But now that people are using AI to start trying to air quote generate leads, it's like I'm getting the same messages with different words from different people. It's like everybody's using the same. It's like an apologetic. Oh, I know everyone's in your inbox, but just give me a second, and I promise you, if your company needs any help, we'll be the one to do your SEO for you. And it's like everything on LinkedIn is fucking SEO or marketing help. And if they did any sort of like 1 minute of research, you would be able to tell that the people that are in these inboxes like shouldn't be in the inboxes they're in. They shouldn't be contacting the people that they're contacting, but they're cold calling so much. It's flooded the market with fake job opportunities, and then people who are not qualified for the job opportunities that are there. And then you add in the automated um, application filtering, and it's like impossible to align with a position unless you basically know a person that's hiring. So it's like automation and um, dudes who are applying for things that they do not qualify for make it impossible for people to be fit with the proper jobs that they're qualified for in the American economy. And that hole is not going to be closed fast enough for them to be able to go through and just start taking out large swaths of the working population, especially the ones who were paying taxes and not getting the benefits from it. So it's even worse of a budget crunch when they are taking these workers out of the economy. The children are not going to be able to replace. Like, let's just assume that they make child labor legal again and they are able to roll back all the laws. All the children are still not going to be able to fucking fill the positions, not going to be able to be trained, not going to be able to. There's not enough of them. And so this is where it looks like the previous iteration of the economy is falling apart in real time, and we're watching them try to patch it, but the reality is it's going to be like Chinese money, it's going to be probably Saudi money, probably money stolen from African resources that's going to come in and save the American people. And that there's like there's no real capital left here. It's all paper capital here, which is why they've been trying to sell Tesla stock and trying to sell Apple stock and trying to sell stock in these companies to the rest of the world. In that, once we took our dollar off the gold standard, we in becoming an inflationary economy, all the other economies that depend upon us are at risk of becoming hyperinflationary by proxy. And then you see it happening, or it's happened in many countries already, but then you see it happen in countries that are dependent upon tourism and don't really have exports, and then they get a bad tourist season, and then suddenly their economy is like on the verge of collapse. Like it happened in Greece, it happened in Spain, and it's happened, it's happened in many countries at this point. And um, America is at this point where the reason I think we're making these, not we, the president is making these like wild threats to international bodies is perception matters a lot, but these are desperate acts. These are not acts of an administration that has confidence in its future. And this is where I mean, like, they haven't they haven't really made any plans for the country, in that the AI announcement got stepped on by China, and ever since then they've been scrambling to try to figure out a way to um, boost the economy. And what did they do? Open it up for investment. That was the immediate move after the AI announcement. They started saying, "Oh, we're going to sell golden tickets or whatever." I forget what they called it. It's like a golden pass or some name he came up with, and it was like, if a company invests, um, it was like a 100 million, or it was like the low end. I think it was 100 million, and then they had different ranges. But it's like, if you invest so much money as an international company, you can just come in and do whatever you want, is basically how he's framing it. And then they got like a Taiwanese chip company to pledge $1 billion. So it's like, these things are being framed as wins to their dumbass constituents, but these are 1,000% the acts of a desperate party and a desperate administration that doesn't have any prospect of American innovation coming back, don't have any more scapegoats. And then they have the looming specter of China just waiting to swoop in and save the poorest people in the economy, which is like, it sounds crazy now, but I think that I think they want didn't whenever that interest in China surged from TikTok ban, they announced a bunch of like scholarships for Americans to come study there. Now, I don't know if you saw I Show Speed. Do you know who that is?
No.
So just it doesn't matter who he is in that the reason it's important is he's an influencer who has one of the biggest followings in Gen Z.
Hmm.
Um, and they just basically took him over to China and did like a promotional tour of him just going around and seeing different Chinese culture and putting it on his stream. And so this one dude has undone so much anti-Chinese propaganda in the last 2 weeks. It's if you it's funny you don't know who he is in that you're going to start, I promise you, now that you know what happened, you're going to start seeing videos and clips of him in China being passed around social media, and then you'll like know where it's coming from. And that's where I'm saying it just happened, so the effects have just started, but it's already like him going around and just showing different parts of Chinese culture to Gen Z is basically going to prevent the government from lying about China to Gen Z. And then if all of the shit they've been told about China is going to be exposed to be lies, like the social credit score is one of the biggest ones that like Americans believed. And then once people started asking Chinese people about it, they're like, what are you talking about? What's social credit score? And so it's shit like that where we've been told so much for so long and there was nothing really to counter it. Like this one dude is the the information shifts that are happening on all these different fronts at the same time. It's too much for this machine to handle. And that's where I'm like, I'm looking at it, and people will say, it's funny to me, of all people, if people knew how long I've been like watching this stuff happen and like saying these different types of things, for somebody to look at me and be like, oh, you're so optimistic about the way you're reading this. It's funny to be at that point in that I feel like I've been pretty consistent about reading politics in that ever since Obama didn't stand up to BP during the oil spill, that was my moment of being like, I can't give these people the benefit of the doubt. I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt against my better inclinations. BP oil spill proved to me that I cannot do that. So ever since 2010, I have not been um like, if somebody needs to be talked about, I'm not going to avoid it just because it's a fucking Democrat. Other people haven't been that way. And so because it's Trump, I think people hear me talking about these things and they're like, they just think that I'm saying them because I hate Trump or I'm like anti-Republican. I'm not anti-Republican or anti-Democrat. I'm anti-bad policy. I'm anti-racist. There's a lot of things I'm anti, but parties aren't really it because the parties can change, the parties can lie. And so I don't really look at like what is in front of a person's name or even the person's name. It's like if you look at their actions and you look at their records and you look at what they say and compare all of those things, that's where a real representation lies. And that's kind of where I'm like, all of the things that these people have been saying, it's so far from the reality that when they're threatening these things, I take them seriously in their threats, but I understand that they're also liars in that they'll threaten some shit they can't do. So I'm not going to get scared every time they threaten some shit. I'm going to go check it out and see, like, oh, should I be worried about them dropping nukes? Should I be worried about them, just dropping nukes randomly? Oh, actually, no, because somebody's come out and said some shit against that. Should I be worried about them deporting people? Well, yes, that's something I should be worried about. What's the rate that they can deport people? How many agents do they have? Well, I guess I shouldn't be worried about them deporting like a million people a month because that's just not logistically possible. So like there's things we should be worried about, but we should also temper our worries and temper our fears so that we're not going so far into the realm of the impossible because we've been prompted to do so that we don't actually go to the things where we can do something about it and start to act. If we get so wrapped up in all of the things that are like the threats that are the worst, it's then super easy to overlook like, oh, these things are under threat, but there are all these courses of action that we can do to protect or at least preserve these things so that it's not actually going to be destroyed or disrupted. And I'll point at Black history is kind of under threat, but not really, because this has happened to Black people before. So we're not going to depend upon the fucking public school system to preserve our story and our history. So a lot of Black history is preserved in Black churches and spaces that are in proximity to the churches, in proximity to the schools, like not necessarily like the Boy Scouts, but it'll be clubs or fraternities and sororities, things like that, that keep their own history in the context of the larger Black diaspora that by proxy are, if they all do that, then the story is decentralized and connected in a way that is accessible, but you can't go into one place and destroy it. And so that's where I think a lot of Black people are unbothered right now, and you don't see Black people responding the same way that I think a lot of white neoliberals are responding. And it's not even the gay white people, and it's not the trans white people. It's the cishet white people who've never really had problems before, who are realizing that they might actually have their lives impacted in one way or another. If anything, I think they are going to have their lives impacted going abroad, and people are going to look at them as Americans and blame them. And that's the type of shit that they don't want, because their proximity to whiteness has protected them on both sides before, but it doesn't protect them anymore. And that's the biggest thing that I believe is happening right now, is like white people abroad are no longer protected from American imperialism. And that's why they're flipping the fuck out. It's like white immigrants are being arrested and white immigrants are being held in detention centers. And that's unacceptable. You can't hold a white person in a detention center without a fucking phone call. How dare
Wait,
you?
didn't they segregate them?
I mean, yeah.
I'm pretty sure I read they segregated.
They segregate them, but the facility was still not up to par, and it was a human rights violation. So when you start
okay,
doing human rights violations on Canadians and British people that look like other white folks, oh no, that shit is not gonna stand. That shit is not gonna stand. Which is why you got Europe talking about fucking ramping up their military um, because they know they can no longer depend upon Americans or American government as this military in exchange for soft power that's real influence, with the caveat that they're not trying to actively control the front end. Now they're trying to come in and control the front end. And even then, the fact that like people in Greenland are talking about independence from Denmark while America comes in and says all this shit, it's like America is the best advocate for undoing colonialism ironically right now. And it's like people, the way that Israel is moving and the way that America is moving has started to impact white people, and Europe is not going to stand for it. And the issue is the current administration believes that they can use the military to threaten Europe into compliance. The problem with that framing is that the military people are going to have to deal with Europe once the current administration's gone. So they're not going to do that. They're not going to go in and treat these diplomatic exchanges as if it's a one-time thing, because it's not a one-time thing for them, which is, God bless the founding fathers. They got some shit right. They got some of the things right. The way our government is broken up, it's really like the structure is really saving our asses right now. And on top of that, I feel like the biggest problem with the Democrats is that their anti-war rhetoric got too sloppy, and they did not do well enough to bring veterans into like the left wing, in that a lot of people who exit the army after having seen battle end up being like anti-war. It's like they may go to war one way and then they come back and they're a completely different person, obviously, but their views have changed so dramatically that now they're anti-war. And the left has not, like I said, they haven't done a good enough job of getting those people into the party and making them integral to like the direction of progress, in that they've been called progressives, but the direction of progress has only really been in one direction so far, and that's like the gay direction. And so I think that's the issue, is like we've seen progress, but it's really like, if the issue is obviously like our rights are not our rights are not limited. It's not a limited number of rights to distribute around to people, except rights are enforced. There's a limited amount of enforcement. And so the progress that women have made compared to the progress that gay people have made in like the last 20 years, it's rather limited, which, when you expand the scope of vision to like 100 years, then it's more on par with each other. Um, like if we expand the scope of progress to like 200 years, it's like black. Okay, there's like Chinese and Italian immigrants at the very lead, Then you have like black people behind them. Then you have women basically behind black men. It don't matter what type of women, but the issue being like white women are usually at the top of this women tier. And like if you're non-white, you're not really like you're not as valued by society as the white woman. So it's like there's the woman tier, and then there's like the intersection of like any other thing besides a woman that moves them below. Then you add on top of that, if somebody's gay, then that moves them a tier lower. Or if they're transgender, then it moves them a tier lower. And so in articulating what is effectively the American caste system, as people move up the caste, the people that feel like they're being passed or feel like they're being gained, some of them start to feel that their identity is being threatened by other people gaining this status. And I think that's what a lot of the anti-transgender movement has been about, in terms of watch white men watching other people gain rights because the white men have had all the rights, has made it so that it in their minds everybody else is getting things while they're not, even though it's actually just other people catching up to white men in society. And so knowing that and knowing where this culture war is coming from, it has a shelf life that's already started to fall apart, mainly because there wasn't any substance to the movement in the first place. It's basically just like, oh, white men are threatened and scared. This is like why they're lashing out and trying to ensure that the American caste system stays in place. And it's like, along the way, other people who were higher up on the caste started joining in. And I think that's why it's hard to understand for some people, like, what's Candace Owens' deal? Or like, what's uh fucking Kanye's deal? Or like, what's Jay-Z's deal? What's Beyonce's deal? Once people get to a certain point and they think that they are at the top of the caste system, it's like the preservation kicks in, and suddenly they don't want to lose anything of the status that they've gained, and then they'll turn on anybody that they were in the group with before or is in the caste below them. And that's how we go from like Kanye saying George Bush doesn't care about black people to wearing a fucking swastika.
Fucking God.
You know what I mean? It's like that that arc alone is going to be studied for so many eons. Like the notion of what money did to him, it's like it's definitely Shakespearean in the scale of the tragedy. Um, but I want to say it's almost worse. It's like,
It's like a tragic comedy of errors.
but and this is where I feel like we've gotten to a point where our disasters are beyond biblical. Our characters are beyond Shakespearean. We're like in this meta stage. Like Shakespeare couldn't have imagined the Kanye arc. You know what I mean? Like the Kanye arc is so much crazier than any character arc, even the ones who are going in the fucking forest with fucking fairies and shit. Like those character arcs don't even compare to the Kanye character arc. What you get, that's what I mean. Like it the
Yeah,
real the real people.
Puck would have sat back and just like sipped on some wine and just watched. He wouldn't have had to do anything.
Puck would have sat there watching Kanye do some nitrous and start ranting about the fucking how slavery was a choice and fucking how black people brought all this shit on themselves. And like Puck wouldn't, what would Puck say to that? Puck
He
wouldn't
would
know
just
what the fuck
fucking.
to
He would
do.
just listen. He'd be like, "Really, tell me more." Oh man.
Because,
I hope we didn't just create a whole new internet genre of like Shakespeare, Kanye injected into Shakespeare. Oh man, I almost feel like I have to apologize to the internet for that.
so,
Fuck it.
Kanye's definitely as a character, I would definitely say he's more tragic than Hamlet. I
Yeah, well, that's because everyone dies in Hamlet. Like nobody has to suffer after they're dead. He's still around. He's got to he's got to sit there and like remember. Oh yeah, he was on top of the world once, and then there's like through not singular acts like multiple and continuing acts of buffoonery managed to put himself into this place where he, I mean, does anyone take him seriously? I mean, anybody? His doctor maybe, but that's got to be really tough. He thought he was like more important than Picasso at one point or something like that. He's like, I'm the only real artist anymore, some shit.
to be fair, Picasso was kind of a hack.
I mean,
I don't know if you know this, but towards the end of his life, Picasso would do fucking drawings and like try to use them to pay for food and shit. It's like Picasso was kind of a self-absorbed douchebag too, so I think they were cut from the same cloth in that regard. But that's also where I'm like, I I feel like Picasso is super overrated too. So I don't know, like in reality,
oh no, I just
when,
think it's funny when anyone like Oasis at one point said that they're like we're bigger than the Beatles, and the Beatles were bigger than Jesus, and who else said some other absurd shit. I think there's like actually a long history of musicians saying really stupid things, like really truly regrettable things, like unsayable, can't unsay this shit kind of stuff. And it might not be career ending. It might just be one of those like low points. And 20 years later, when the nostalgia acts kick in, they can go back and tour, and everyone's forgotten that they said dumb shit. But I think there might actually be like a point of no return. And I'm pretty sure Kanye found that point.
that's and I'm definitely on that same boat. I just feel like Picasso just happens to be one of the biggest art hacks of all time. So he is like an easy target. Him and
Oh
Andy
sure,
Warhol.
yeah. Well, Andy Warhol's like my normal favorite target, but I'm pretty sure no, but like I'm almost positive Kanye like focused on Picasso. Maybe it was Andy Warhol though. It doesn't matter. Kanye is weird, and I can't listen to his music. It's too weird. It's like it's not for me, and that's fine. There's plenty of music that I like that other people don't like, and I accept that, and I think it actually keeps things interesting. But man, when somebody only exists in the media as a object lesson, that's like
Some people hate Kanye for Nazi shit. I've been hating Kanye for using sped up vocal samples and making it a thing. So
oh man, I
I was
totally
ahead of the
forgot that he
hating
did
Kanye
that,
curve.
dude. That whole album that like I don't know came out like 20 years ago or whatever. That was like the end of cool sampling in pop music, because then everything
Yes.
got sped up or chopped and screwed, one of the two. But
Through the wire.
the chopped and screwed stuff sounded really cool because it was real slow, and you got to hear these synthesizers churning at these like, almost anxiety inducing low speeds, and that was neat. But no, the sped up crap, that was too much.